I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. A man's empty praise, the treasures of faith are never enough. You came along and put me back together, and every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Come on, if you know it, sing it loud. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing. Nothing is better than you. You sound beautiful. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. Show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Lord, you see them all, and you still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley, and there's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me again. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing. Nothing is better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing. Nothing is better than you. Come on, you turn. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who can. Oh, there's nothing, come on, tell them, better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing. Nothing is better than you. I search the whole world. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing. Nothing is better than you. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways.
we doing tonight? Hey, welcome to all the 7th graders in the house. Yes, come on, let's give it up. It was like we were so enthusiastic about them earlier, and all of a sudden we weren't, Gigi. I'm glad they're here.
Yeah, I am too.
Yeah, I'm glad everyone is here. Everyone who's been here forever. For those that are new, welcome. Know that there's a place for you here, and that's really cool. We like to say it's the best night of the week, and I really do believe Sunday nights are the best night of the week. And so, with that being said, hey, my name's Chris. If we haven't met, we're gonna sing a new song. Is that okay?
Woo!
Thanks, Gigi.
I'm here for you, man.
We're gonna get there tonight. Okay?
Yeah.
It's like 7th graders, me. I mean, that's probably right.
Yeah,
but,
100%. 100%.
So we've talked about this in here before, right? Like, and we've been talking about it all summer that Jesus he's a miracle worker, right? And he performs miracles, and we know that he's a savior, and we know he's a healer. We sing about that a lot too. But one thing I know for myself is oftentimes I forget that Jesus is king, and that he is over everything. And so we were talking, and we were just thinking about like tonight, and and the fall, and like where we're going with like what we want to sing. And man, this song like just fell into our laps. And in the first line, it says, "The King is in the room." And if you don't know what's happening right now in the room, that's Jesus. He's the King. And so we're going to sing about the King that's presently in the room. And he's reigning in our hearts and in our praises tonight. So we want to teach it to you. It goes something like this. The King is in the room. Come see the scars of love upon his hands. The King is in the room. We'll watch the darkness flee at his command. Who is this King? Who is this King? His name is Jesus. His name is Jesus. Light of the world. There's freedom in his name. Awesome in power. Reigning forever. Light of the world. There's freedom in his name. The healer's in the room. Let miracles break out across this place. Yeah. The Savior's in the room. No soul beyond the boundaries of his grace. There's resurrection power in his name. His name is Jesus. His name is Jesus. Light of the world. There's freedom in his name. Awesome in power. Reigning forever. Light of the world. There's freedom in his name. There's freedom in his name. There's freedom in his name. There's never been a love so great. He died so we could live. Then he rose up from that grave. Name another king like this. All authority forever belongs to him. Now it's in victory. Name another king like this. Never been a love so great. He died so we could live. Then he rose up from that grave. Name another king like this. Now all authority forever belongs to him. Who's in victory? Name another king like this. Name another king like this. Who is this king? His name is Jesus. His name is Jesus. Light of the world. There's freedom in his name. Awesome in power. Reigning forever. Light of the world. There's freedom in his name. His name is Jesus. His name is Jesus. Light of the world. There's freedom in his name. Awesome in power. Reigning forever. Light of the world. There's freedom in his name. There's never been a love so great. He died so we could live. Then he rose up from that grave. Name another king like this. Now all authority forever belongs to him. And he rose in victory. Name another king. Name another king like this. Name another king like this. His name is Jesus. You are here, you're moving in our midst. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, you're working in this place. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, you're working in this place. I worship you, I worship you. Come on, we all know it. Let's lift it up. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. We believe tonight, we believe. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. You are here, touching every heart. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, healing every heart. worship you. I worship you. You are here, mending every heart. I worship you. Worship you. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. I'll sing it again. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 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 Even when
I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. Never stop.
Come on, let's say it together. Come on.
Working.
Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel that you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel that you're working. You never stop.
working. Never stop.
Oh, we believe. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God,
That is who you are.
waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper,
Light in the darkness.
my God, that is who you are. 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 Let me just sing it one more time. Let faith rise in this room tonight. He's our waymaker. Can we say? Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God. Let faith rise, let faith rise. Waymaker, miracle worker. That is who you are. 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 Oh, that is who you are. That is who you Yeah, you are the way when there seems to be no way. You are the light in the darkness. And we thank you that you are a king that came to serve and not be served. And so, Father, continue to work in this place, in our hearts, even if we don't see it, even if we don't feel it. God, we know you are here, and we know that you're working. Let us not leave this place the same way we walked in. We invite you, Holy Spirit, to come and do what only you can do. Let it be so in Jesus' name. And everyone tonight said, amen. You guys can have a seat.
Hello. How's it going? My name is Jess. Hello. It's good to see you. My name is Jess. I was just wondering if we could do something real quick, just humor me, because we also have some people in the room who have graduated from high school. This is their last, maybe not their last. A couple of those, and so I thought it would be great if we could I'm just going to do something. So first of all, for the 3 of you in the room who consider yourselves to be 12th grade graduates. That would include Nico. Yeah, Nico. And then, yes. Would you guys raise your hands so we can see who you are? Yeah? Yes? Is it your last Sunday? Okay, so Vera and Allison, this is it. They're headed to college this week. So that's super sad. We're going to pray for them at the very end. But also, if you are going into 12th grade, will you raise your hand? Yeah. Rising seniors? 2 of you? All right. 3 of you? 3 of you. All right. Oh, 4 of you. Thank you, Caitlin. Okay, rising 11th graders. Rising juniors. Yeah. There's 100 million of you. Rising 10th graders. Where are the sophomores? Yeah. Yep. There's some of them here. Rising 9th grade. A little more hesitant, but I still heard you. That's great. Rising 8th grade. Good. And rising 7th grade. Look at that. Awesome. All right. So I wanted you to do that. I wanted you to do that because, like Kyle said, we've got a bunch of people in the room who are new or new-ish, or still getting to know us, and I just wanted them to maybe see that there are others that are in their grade that are here. It can just be hard. Also, you guys, there's like no seats left. So it's clearly like, yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Okay, so if you are just joining us, or maybe you've been in and out of town all summer and you don't remember what we're doing in here, or maybe you've been here every week and you just don't pay very close attention, we are in week 7 of the Summer of Miracles. We have been spending 2 weeks in each gospel, and there are 4 gospels, and this is week 7, which means if you do the math, we are in the first week of the last gospel. The Gospel of John is where we are ending our series, and what we've been doing is we've been looking at a miracle, or like some miracles that are all kind of grouped together, 2 weeks in each gospel, and looking at those each week, and just kind of talking about, like, what does this teach us about God? What does this teach us about who we are? What can we learn? And hopefully you've been seeing some themes come together as we have been, if you've been here week in, week out, hopefully you've started to sense some themes that are coming out of what Jesus is trying to do when he does these miracles. And certainly I'm going to try to tie some of those together for you tonight and help you to get a sense of that. We have one more week in a different gospel, not the same gospel, but a different story next week. But this is the last one that has some of these threads in them that I'm hoping you are picking up on. So, the Gospel of John. I know you're not supposed to have a favorite gospel, I guess, kind of like you're not supposed to have a favorite child, but I do, and this is it. The Gospel of John is my favorite out of the four for so many reasons, like so many, most of which we can't talk about tonight because we don't have time. But the first reason that is one of my favorites. Well, this isn't the reason why, but John was likely the last gospel that was actually written down. Probably the last gospel that anybody took the time to write down the stories was the Gospel of John. And it was much later than, we call them the synoptic gospels. So Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the other three gospels we've talked about, they're referred to academically as the synoptic gospels. Syn, meaning similar, right? S-Y-N. So if you think about your like Latin synonyms, synoptic, same beginning, right? So the synoptic gospels, because they're all really similar, they all they used one another to be written, and then also this other source called the Q source, and you don't care about all that. But the synoptic gospels are similar. John does none of that. John probably didn't have any source material that he was working with when he wrote his gospel. It's very different. There are stories that appear in John that don't appear in any of the other gospels, and there's actually only like 2 or 3 stories in John that also appear in the other gospels, and one of those is the resurrection of Jesus, which without that, we like have problems, right? So John is very different than the rest of the gospels. John also has a really unique opening. So the whole book is like this, but John opens with this beautiful hymn about in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and he was with God in the beginning. And it's really poetic and beautiful, and it's this ancient hymn that John starts out with that's about Jesus, but it refers to Jesus as the Word. And the whole book is really written with this level of like metaphor and imagery that's kind of unique to John. It is unique. It's not kind of. It's unique to John. But while it's written with like this metaphor and this imagery, John is also written with really simplistic language. So John is written at like a 3rd grade reading level. And so he's got this like elaborate metaphor, but with like really simple Greek. And one of the theories that's out there for why this is that more than likely the person who wrote John, Greek was not their first language. So they're writing, they have some sort of a language that they speak. Maybe some of you who are bilingual or have, maybe you have like a language that you speak at home, but like if you were to try to like write down, like tell a story in that language, like you would maybe have a hard time grabbing some of those words. Maybe you are familiar with that experience. I have, my nanny is Syrian, and she and her family speak Arabic in their house, right? And so her kids, who were all born in Syria, but have lived in the United States now, particularly the youngest two, have all lived in the United States now since they were, the youngest has all moved here when she was in 2nd grade. So they primarily speak English at school and with their friends, right? But then they speak Arabic at their house. And all of their education has been in English. So Hazal can, like when she writes like a paper or something, she's going into 8th grade now. So if she writes a paper or does an assignment for school, then she writes it in English. And so all of her like, the broader vocabulary, her more like academic way of writing is all English. If she were to try to write an assignment for school at an 8th grade reading level in Arabic, she would get an F. Even though that's the first language, that's her native language, that's the first language that she spoke, but it's not the language that she's the most comfortable with, right? So John is actually written kind of in a similar way, where either this person is learning Greek, or this person maybe knows Greek, but like spoke Greek maybe originally, but doesn't live in a place where Greek is often spoken now, and so it's like this it's like an immigrant language. And here's the reason why that is. You either don't care at all and are so bored right now, or you're like absolutely fascinated by this, and I don't really care because I'm really fascinated by it. So here's the reason why this is. So John is not a missionary text. Here's what I mean by that. We talked about this last week with Luke, about how Luke is written to convince people about who Jesus was. John's not a missionary text. John doesn't care about whether or not John's not trying to convince you to believe in Jesus. That's not what John is about. John is an identity text. John is about this is who we are because of what Jesus did.
John is a text that tells us who we are. This text has a mission that you would remember who Jesus is, that Jesus is the Messiah, and that by believing in him, you might have life. And the purpose of John is to remind you of that so that you can live in that, so that you can embrace that and like let that sink into your bones. And so this isn't a missionary text that's trying to necessarily convince you of anything. It's an identity text that is trying to remind you of who you already are. Does that make sense? Can you appreciate the distinction between those two things? Okay, so there are only 7 miracles in John, the whole book. It's actually one of the longer gospels, but there's only 7 miracles, and John refers to them as signs, not miracles. All of them are tied to some sort of a Jewish festival or celebration. And they're all, so it's always like a sign happens after Jesus like goes to Jerusalem for the Passover or something like that. And today's text is no exception. So, and there's a bunch of other reasons I love John. We could talk about it sometime if you want, but those are some of the things I think are interesting that I think are going to be helpful for today. So, we're going to look at John chapter 5. We're going to read this story. Some of you maybe are familiar with this story. And we're going to sort of stop as we go and talk about some things and then keep going. So, John chapter 5, we're starting in verse 1. So, afterward, Jesus returned to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish holy days, like I just talked about, remember? Inside the city, near the sheep gate, was the pool of Bethesda with 5 covered porches. Crowds of sick people, blind, lame, or paralyzed, lay on the porches. One of the men lying there had been sick for 38 years. When Jesus saw him and knew he had been ill for a long time, he asked him, "Would you like to get well?" "I can't, sir," the sick man said, "for I have no one to put me into the pool when the water bubbles up. Someone else always gets there ahead of me." Okay, let's talk about this for just a second. So Jesus is in Jerusalem, and there are these series of pools that are there in the Jerusalem near this gate called the Sheep Gate, and the pools are often referred to as Bethesda. I have some pictures of what these look like now for you to see, just in case you're curious. So these, archaeologically we've dug these up, and so this kind of matches with the description of what we've heard here. There are in fact 5 different. I can't tell from here, but apparently the people who are smarter than me and are archaeologists can tell this. There are 5 different covered porches and patios that are around these pools, and that's the same thing from a different angle. And so we've dug it up, and so we're pretty clear that this is inside Jerusalem. It's in the right spot. It's near the right gate. That this is what they're talking about in there. And so I just thought it was interesting to look at, like, oh, hey, something that we can like line up. Like we can put the layers on top of each other. Okay, so what the theory, the working theory, was that something caused the water in these pools to bubble up. Have you guys ever been to Yellowstone? Yeah. Have you seen Old Faithful? Yeah. So we went to Yellowstone. We saw Old Faithful, and it's one of Old Faithful is this like natural fountain that like springs up and like does a little show, and it does it completely naturally, just on its own. It's just part like it's just God, I guess. I don't know. I'm sure there's a scientist who could explain to us exactly what it is that's happening. I'm not that, but it happens like on the dot, except that it's getting a little bit less regular, which is bad for everybody. But Old Faithful is, and so it's a similar idea that the water springs up and gets stirred around. But the theological, like the theory that at the time, the belief was that an angel or some sort of other magical power would come down and stir the waters up. And whoever the first person was to get down off the porch and into the water after they got stirred up would be healed of whatever their problem was, whatever it was. And there must have been, in order for there to be so many people who were gathered around these waters all the time waiting for the water to be stirred up, there must have been some people who like got in the pool and were healed. Whether it was an angel and whether God was doing that or whether that was just, I don't know what, I have no idea. But this is a working theory that this dude has been sitting by the pool for 38 years waiting to be healed. I'm 39 years old. So he's been sitting at this pool 1 year longer, 1 year less than I've been alive, right? So imagine 38 years. He's probably old, probably has not been there his entire life. So he's an older guy, especially by first century Palestine terms. And he's been waiting by this pool his entire life, waiting to get well. And so Jesus comes to him. He sees him. He knows he's been ill for a long time. Whether he knows that because somebody told him or whether he knows that because he's Jesus, I don't know. But he knows that this guy's been sitting there a long time. And Jesus says, "Would you like to get well?" And the dude's answer, listen to it again. "I can't, sir," the sick man said, "for I have no one to put me into this pool when the water bubbles up. Someone else always gets there ahead of me." Is that what Jesus asked? Like, that's an answer to some question, but that's not an answer to the question Jesus asked, right? Like, I can just picture Jesus being there like, okay, I didn't ask you why you couldn't get well. I didn't ask you whether you could. I asked you if you wanted to, right? So let's talk about the mindset of this guy. Let's try to put ourselves in the mindset of this man who has been paralyzed his entire life and has been waiting by this pool for 38 years, hoping to get well. He seems to have nowhere to go. He doesn't seem like a job or anything like that, more than likely. He doesn't seem to have a reason to get well other than just want, like a desire, like that would be great if I could walk. And the thing is, he has to want it for himself. He has to want it to get well. This is true in so many areas of our lives. Like if we want to get well, then we have to want it for ourselves, right? We can't just, we can't want it because like our parents want it. Or we can't want it because somebody else wants it. Like in whatever part of our lives is unwell, we have to want it for ourselves if we're going to get well. Someone else can't want it for us for it to work. This is it's like in counseling. This is one of the biggest stumbling blocks of people who go into counseling is that they're not there for themselves. They're there because somebody has convinced them to go. Some of you in this room maybe are in counseling or something because your parents are making you go and you don't want to be there, and you don't get well until you want to get well for yourself, right? The same thing is true of your faith. You aren't going to connect in this room or in whatever faith room you find yourself sitting in. You aren't going to find yourself having a deeper relationship with Jesus until you want it for yourself. I can't want it for you. Your parents can't want it for you. And you might be going through the motions, sitting by the pool for 38 years, waiting to magically get better. But until you decide you want it for yourself, and when Jesus asks the question, do you want to be made well? You answer the question instead of giving the excuses for why you can't get well. You're never going to get well. So, you would think, based on what we have seen so far in the previous 6 weeks of this series, that Jesus would be like, okay, I'm out. Like, if you don't want it, then there's nothing for me to do here, right? There's no faith here to work with. But that's not what happens. Chapter 5, verse 8, Jesus told him, stand up, pick up your mat, and walk. Instantly, the man was healed. He rolled up his sleeping mat and began walking. Jesus' word of command to this man was like the creative word of God. The word was uttered and the deed was done. This man must have felt changes taking place in his body and feeling whole again because he picked up his mat and walked instantly, is what the text says. There's evidence of complete healing. This is one of those healing miracles that Jesus performs without any sign of faith on the part of the beneficiary. There's one or two other examples of that throughout the text, but it's really rare for Jesus to do something unless there is some faith somewhere for Jesus to call out. Right? Clearly, this guy thought more in terms of like the magic of the pool because he believed the commonly held view that the first one in the water was the one who would get healed. And he seems to have thought that Jesus' question was not even really worth answering because instead he gives us all of these justifications and excuses. It must be conceded, though, I have to say, in fairness to this dude, Jesus says, stand up, take up your mat, and walk. And he does it. Like he must have felt something happening in his body because now that he's been told, stand up, take up your mat and walk, he responds instantly. He just does it. He stands up and takes his mat and he walks. So while he may not have known who Jesus was, and he probably didn't, because if you noticed, he says, I can't, sir. And most of the time, if you pay attention to the text, you'll see that the person who Jesus is interacting with at least has a working knowledge of who he is. They'll say rabbi or Lord or master or whatever the word is, but it's a more like formal thing. And this one is just like an anonymous sir. It's like, sorry, mister, but I can't, right? So he doesn't even seem to know who Jesus is. He doesn't have any faith prior to Jesus' healing. But when he senses that he is well, he does not hesitate to embrace it and step into it. And then verse 9 goes on to say, but this miracle happened on the Sabbath. So the Jewish leaders objected. They said to the man who was cured, you can't work on the Sabbath. The law doesn't allow you to carry that sleeping mat. But he replied, "The man who healed me told me, 'Pick up your mat and walk.' 'Who said such a thing as that?' they demanded. The man didn't know, for Jesus had disappeared into the crowd. But afterward, Jesus found him in the temple and told him, 'Now you are well, so stop sinning, or something even worse may happen to you.' Then the man went and told the Jewish leaders that it was Jesus who had healed him." Okay, first of all, the problem for the Jewish leaders is not the healing in the first place. That's not the problem. The problem is that this guy is carrying his mat, and you're not supposed to do that on the Sabbath. You're not supposed to carry anything inside of your home. You're not supposed to do work at all on the Sabbath day, according to Jewish law. And so the problem is that he is carrying his mat. The act of carrying the mat was considered work. And so what's interesting about this is that it's fairly well known that this guy had been lying by the pool. He's been there 38 years. It's in Jerusalem. It's in a very populated city. That Jerusalem is where the temple is. The center of all religious activity happens here in Jerusalem. And this guy's been there for almost 40 years. Guys, there are people who ask for money on different street corners around Fairfax County that have been there for a few weeks, and I can recognize who they are, right? Like, if you see somebody in a similar place for 40 years, you're going to recognize them. So it's fairly well known that this guy has been there for a really long time, and now he's walking. But the thing that the Jewish leaders are concerned about or are interested in is not that the guy who couldn't walk 5 minutes ago is walking now. The thing that the leaders are concerned about is that he is not following the letter of the law according to the way that they have interpreted it, not what's actually there, but their interpretation of it to the exact letter, which is totally messed up, right? He was paralyzed, and now he's walking, and you're giving him a hard time for carrying his mat? Like, what is this? What kind of religion is it when we can't celebrate the victory in somebody's life and instead give them a hard time because they're not doing it the way that we want them to? We are all guilty of this at some level, that we see something happening in somebody's life, and instead of rejoicing that the miracle is happening, instead of rejoicing that God is doing something in their life, we're mad because it doesn't look the way that we think it ought to look. And that's what the Pharisees are doing here. But later, Jesus finds this guy at the temple. So here's what's funny. He gets healed. Paralyzed man is not paralyzed anymore. And the Jews ask him, "Who did this?" And he still doesn't know. Like, he didn't know who Jesus was before the miracle. Now he's healed. He never took the time to find out Jesus' name. And Jesus has, like, disappeared into the crowd. So Jesus comes to find him, which is interesting because if it's a festival, there would have been thousands of people around the temple. But Jesus manages to find this one dude. So Jesus finds him at the temple. And Jesus says to the man, "So you're well. You can walk." And then he says, the same word well that he uses here was used in Jesus' question before when he said, "Do you want to get well?" And the word itself, the Greek word itself, means to be restored or to be made whole. So it's about more than just not being sick anymore. It's about more than the bones that weren't working. It's about a wholeness to who you are. It's about your insides and your outsides being restored. Do you want to be restored is what Jesus asked. Do you want to be made whole? And Jesus then warns the man, "So I've made you whole. Now stop sinning or something worse may happen to you." Now, let me tell you a little bit about the Greek tense of this phrase, stop sinning. It implies, the way that it's written in the Greek, it's hard for us to really grasp in the English, but the way it's written in the Greek implies that the guy is actively sinning when Jesus walks up to him. So in the 45 minutes since he learned how to walk again, he has found something to do that Jesus is saying, "Hey, stop, what are you doing? Stop it. Stop sinning. Something else may happen to you." And who knows what that could be. I don't think that Jesus here is saying that getting sick or being paralyzed is a result of sinning. I think Jesus is simply saying, you've got a chance now to be made whole. Don't squander it. You have a responsibility now as a person who's been restored to be well. Don't take advantage of it, because the spiritual and the physical are linked. We know this. You can't say my spiritual life is in great shape when you're in rough shape spiritually, right? Sometimes it's our spiritual health that needs to be attended to impact our physical health, and sometimes it's our physical health that needs to be attended to impact our spiritual health. And Jesus knows this because he's all the time going around forgiving people and then healing them. or the healing people and then forgiving them. We've talked about this. How many weeks have we talked about the connection between these two things? Where we've talked about how like heals somebody, but he's not just healing them on the outside, he's healing them on the inside, or go and sin no more, and what's the real miracle here? Like we've talked about this in different iterations every single week because this is so important to Jesus. That you are not just made well on the outside, but that you are made well on the inside. That it's everything. And so he's healed his physical ailments. He's made him physically whole, but now he's challenging him to be spiritually whole as well. It strikes me that no one expects much of you when you're sick, right? Have any of you had COVID? You had COVID? Any of you have COVID bad enough that you were like in bed? A few of you had it bad enough that you were, or the flu or whatever. Any of you? Okay. I had my appendix taken out in 2010. It was a long time ago. And it was pretty bad. I was in the hospital for a couple of days. So if you know anything about appendectomies and about like appendix bursting thing, there's like stages. And there's like stage 1, 2, 3, 4, and then burst appendix, right? So it's like stage 1 is like, you should keep an eye on that. Stage 5, if your appendix bursts, you can go in sepsis, like you can get shock, go in sepsis shock and taxa shock, and you can die, right? So a burst appendix is a really big deal. So I didn't know that it was my appendix. I didn't really realize that. I had let it go for a pretty long time. Like I didn't know, and it happened really fast. It was a Sunday, and I was alone at church. We had this thing that was happening that night. We didn't have hanger and Sunday nights at that point, and Kyle was on vacation for Thanksgiving. It was the Sunday after Thanksgiving, I think, and Kyle was on vacation, and it was just me, and there was this like thing that we were hosting that night for one of our students, and so I just had to be there. I just had to be a staff person that was there, and I remember my stomach was hurting, but I didn't anyway, you don't want to know the whole story. Basically, by the time I got to the hospital and they diagnosed me that I needed an appendectomy, I was at stage 4 on my way to stage 5 of my appendix bursting. Like it was bad. It was the worst pain. I've given birth twice. My appendix, like that was the worst pain I've ever experienced in my entire life, okay? So it was really bad. And you know what? Afterwards, I was in the hospital for a couple of days, and then I was kind of laid up, at home. I was in grad school at the time, and I had finals. And I remember emailing my professor and being like, hey, I just had an appendectomy, so I'm going to do my best on this final. And he wrote me back and was like, sounds good. I was like, that's not the answer I was looking for. But nobody's supposed to expect anything from you when you're sick, right? If you're in the hospital, you're supposed to just lay there and get better. If you're sick, if you have COVID and you're like laid out in bed, you're supposed to just keep an eye on the breathing, right? And just get better. That's what you're supposed to focus on when you're really sick. So no one expects much of you when you're sick. But once you're well, then you gotta start doing stuff again, right? Like once you're well, you gotta start taking out the trash again. Once you're well, you have to start going to school again. You have to catch up on all of the homework. Once you're well, you have responsibilities. This guy has been made well, and now he has a responsibility to do something with that. When our insides match our outsides, when there's integrity between our spiritual selves and our physical selves, that's when we have wholeness. That's true health, the kind of health that Jesus wants for us. One more little piece of this, and then we'll be done. So the Jewish leaders began harassing Jesus for breaking the Sabbath rules. But Jesus replied, my Father is always working, and so am I. So the Jewish leaders tried all the harder to find a way to kill him. That escalated quickly. Yeah? For not only had he broke the Sabbath, he called God his Father, thereby making himself equal with God. Okay, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Last week, the week before, I don't remember. But this is the crux of what Jesus was crucified for. If you've ever been trying to figure it out, like what did Jesus do that was so bad that they put him up on a cross, right? Here's what it is. It's not the blasphemy necessarily, though that's a thing. But it's the way that he and his ministry are upsetting the power structure of the Jewish religious leaders. Okay? When you challenge the power structure, when you threaten the power of an established authority, those in power are going to seek to destroy you. Okay? It's just the truth. It's as true today as it was thousands of years ago. If you pay any attention to current events or the news or politics, and I'm not making a political statement, this is true of every single person in politics out there. If you threaten the power structure, Those who have something to lose by you threatening their power will seek to destroy you, right? We see it in the news all the time if you pay attention. So this is just as true today. The Jewish leaders see what Jesus is doing as a power grab. He's saying that he is God, and yes, that is blasphemy in and of itself. That's a problem. But the bigger deal is all the people who are listening to him, who are following him, the reputation he's getting, his willingness to take on those power structures so clearly. He keeps having these confrontational conversations, outwitting and outsmarting the power structures and the people in power. They don't like that. They don't like being shown how stupid they are in front of so many other people. And here's what I think is so interesting about that. The Jews aren't in power either, right? The Romans are the ones who are in power. The Roman Empire has authority over this entire land and over all of these people. So the Jews who are fighting so hard, who are willing to kill Jesus to protect their power, they just have this little, they've just carved out this little piece that's for them. But even that little piece they've carved out for them, they are unwilling to let go of. So the Jews don't have any power either. But they're not about to let go of the power that they think they have. And Jesus doesn't want their power. That's what they get so wrong. Jesus doesn't want the Jewish leaders' power. Jesus doesn't even want the Romans' power. He's not even interested in taking out the empire. Jesus already has all the power. Jesus is God, right? He doesn't need their power. So what he's about to do is going to be the culmination of all of that when he gets up on that cross. But let's wrap this up by going back to that healing for just a minute. Why do you think God healed this guy? He doesn't have any faith. He doesn't know who Jesus is. Why did Jesus heal him? Given everything that we've learned about miracles and signs in the last 6 weeks, I think it's an important question for you to answer for yourself. Why do you think Jesus healed this man? I don't have an answer. The text doesn't tell us, so I can't give you an answer about why Jesus healed him. But I think it's an important question for us to wrestle with. Why do you think Jesus chose to heal this man? I hope that you've picked up a theme. That when Jesus heals, it's never just about the external or the physical or the medical. It's always also about the inside and the spiritual and the heart and soul. Because sometimes the physical healing happens first, and sometimes the spiritual healing happens first. Sometimes faith precedes the healing, and sometimes healing precedes the faith. Sometimes people are worthy of being healed, and sometimes they aren't. But always, 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 people are healed so that room can be made to be made whole. For wholeness to happen, for wellness, for the spiritual and the physical and the emotional and the mental and the social to all be restored. So we're going to talk about one more healing next week. But tonight, before you head out, I'm convinced that Jesus is still in the healing business. We're going to talk a ton about this in October, but I think Jesus wants some of you to hear tonight, as we are 6 days before school starting for most of you. I think Jesus wants you to hear tonight that Jesus wants to heal you. Whatever parts of you need healing. I think Jesus still wants to see wholeness in your life and wellness of your life. And I don't know what part of your life needs healing, but for some of you, Jesus has been asking you for a while now, do you want to be made well? And you've been responding with excuses and rationales and justifications for why you have to stay sick. Or maybe you've been going through the motions of healing, but it's something that you've been told to do, not something that you've wanted for yourself. Maybe like this guy, you've stopped believing that it's even possible, that after all, that you've been laying by this pool for 38 years and nothing's happened yet, so why would today be any different? But Jesus didn't ask the man if he believed in him to make him well, or if he had faith in anything, really. All he asked was if he wanted it. Do you want to be well? And that's the question that Jesus is asking every single one of us tonight. And we have to decide if we do or not. How are we going to respond to Jesus' question? I put some slips of paper on your tables and some pens. And there's 3 questions on there. And it'd be great if you wanted to answer them tonight. That'd be great. But you might not have the answer tonight. Let me talk you through the 3 questions. Let me talk you through the 3 questions real quick. And then I'll give you a minute to maybe answer them.
first question is you have to name it. If you want to be made well, you have to name what it is that's broken. Where does it hurt? This is the question that I ask particularly my 1.5-year-old all the time when she's crying and something hurts. Where does it hurt? You've got to show me where it hurts. Where does it hurt? You got to name where the pain is, name what needs healing in your life, be specific, and name it. And then the second step is this, to answer the question, do you want to be made well? Jesus is asking, how would you answer? And be honest. The paralytic was honest. You should be honest too. Besides, God already knows what the honest answer is. There's no reason for you to lie to God on paper. And then the third thing is this. Stop sinning. What in your life needs to stop? Not necessarily because it's a condition of your healing, but because healing is holistic. Real healing is more than just the things that we acknowledge are broken. That Jesus tells the man after he's healed him to stop sinning, to stop doing whatever it was that he was doing that isn't what God wanted for him. So what do you need to confess and stop doing as part of your own journey to wholeness, to being made well? You might not have answers to all of these questions right now, and that's okay. I'm not collecting these. You don't have to give these to me, but I hope you'll spend some time with them. Maybe answer them when you've got time later. But healing can never be boiled down to a formula. God doesn't work like that. Miracles don't work that way. Faith doesn't work that way. So I'm not saying that this is 3 steps to being whole. This is not it. This is not the formula you work in order to be whole. I am saying that the journey to healing and wholeness starts with a first step in God's direction, and that these are 3 steps that you can make today. And who knows what God will do in response. Let me pray for you. God, I pray for healing and wholeness and wellness. I pray that our insides might match our outsides. I pray that you would show us the steps that we need to take, the path that we need to be on, to have integrity in our lives, to be one. God, we thank you for the ways that you work miracles, both thousands of years ago and today. And God, I pray that in this room that we might pursue wholeness and restoration in such a way that we see some miracles ourselves. God, as these students go through their last week of summer, I just pray that you would be working on their hearts to prepare them for the year that's ahead, for the relationships that they will make or change or whatever, for the academic work that is in front of them, for all the different things that have to happen in order for a school year to take place, God, for the family dynamics that they are dealing with as they go through school, for the small groups that they're going to be placed in. God, I just pray that this week that you would just be working on their hearts, and that one of the things that you might do in their hearts is to encourage them to pursue wholeness. We love you, Jesus. In your name we pray. Amen.